when I played against Utami in Corsairs Closed recently in the 1v1, I lost and I was crying, but I was not crying because I lost, right? Like I was crying because that was such a good match and I feel like I exerted everything to play that.
The following is a conversation with xootynator, a top Canadian OOS player since 2018, Twitch streamer, 3D modeler, and overall positive figure in the OOS community. Not to mention, a wonderful person overall, and one that I'm very grateful to consider a friend. This is the honmi podcast. To support it, you can subscribe on YouTube, or support me directly using the Patreon link in the description. And now for my conversation with xootynator. What do you want to be remembered for?
What do I want to be remembered for? I think the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was like, maybe I'm past this point now, but definitely like when I got unbanned in Osu, I think I kind of really showed like not just in Osu necessarily, but that me as a person had like a really strong sense of like perseverance, and like I was so turbo on the hate grind, and like I felt like I wanted to improve myself so much to like prove to not only others but to myself that I could do whatever I set my mind to. So like that mentality, I want to be known for.
You described it as hate grind.
Yeah, I was definitely on the hate grind.
That's an interesting wording. Do you feel hate is a better motivator than some other things out there? Or what are your thoughts on hate as a motivation in general?
Yeah. I wouldn't actually say I'm like a hateful person or like I'm spiteful, but it's definitely there where like maybe some sort of like more so competitiveness, or like I would just like to prove people wrong. Like I just said that, but
right.
It was definitely like people making bad comments about me that I just wanted to like stomp on them, like not in like a mean way, but like look at who you're talking to about kind of way.
And I mean, that was a really rough period from what I remember for you, like in general. So for context for anyone listening, I think it was for around a year that you were falsely banned on Osu due to cheating accusations.
Yeah.
How long was that exactly?
Yeah, so it was about a year. Like I think it was just upcoming to a year, maybe by a month or two. And I remember though, like when I got unbanned, for some reason I thought that all the comments would just go away and like I would be, quote unquote seen as legit. But for a couple months after that too, like anything that I was doing was kind of just like, oh, this is just a cheater.
Like brushed under the rug.
Yeah. Like nobody was really looking at me in the sense that I was actually like a good player and like I was cool.
I think it especially didn't help that at the time there was really bad culture around cheating, for lack of a better term, where there were a lot of players that had, that were relatively trusted names as well that sort of came up as cheaters. So I think that sort of context within the community definitely didn't help your case. So sort of having been on the receiving end of those false accusations, are there any lessons that you learned about trust?
About trust? Maybe. I do remember I had a close group of friends at the time. Like when it happened, and also like after I got unbanned, I was finding new people to interact with because I was just coming back into the community. But like my friends, thankfully.
And these were Osu friends?
Yeah, these are like Osu friends. I think it was actually like I can't remember exactly how we all came together, but just mutual friends. I guess it was like 10 of us maybe, but my closer friends, like they believed me and they made me feel like I wasn't crazy. But in terms of my trust with like the community and the game, like I felt very heartbroken, like because that was just the game I had fun playing, right? Like I just felt like I was so out of place when I came back as well, and when I got banned.
Do you feel like things would have been different if you didn't have those couple of friends that really trusted you?
Yeah, maybe. Like I like to think that I have trust in myself, and that I can help myself out in situations like that. But for sure, it made me feel better because I definitely might I probably wouldn't have come back to Osu basically if I didn't have those friends, right? Because then I would have had nothing left for the game.
I remember you described Osu as sort of a stress relief at the time, although I think as you started getting cheating accusations, it sort of became double-edged, so to speak. Trying to play Osu when trying to play something that used to be a stress relief just for it to be where you sort of found the most stress in that time of your life.
Yeah, it was really stressful. Like now looking back at it, I'm proud of myself that I eventually got through it because like it became worth it. It actually became my job. It's actually my main source of income now. But it was like so hard. I actually thought about just giving up so many times and like quitting Osu altogether because I really was having times where I couldn't handle the stuff that people were saying about me. But yeah, eventually I made it through and it was pretty worth it.
So Osu definitely has been the game that you've invested the most in, I would probably assume. But if I can step back a little bit to maybe xootynator, what was the first game that you really got into?
um, if I'm thinking like way back, the actual first interactions I think I had with video games was my old like original Xbox, like the first series of Xbox. I had this Sega Mega Collection, and I actually still have it in my possession, where it had like 100 Sega games or something. Most of them were Sonic games, so I would be playing those with my dad. So I actually grew up as a console gamer, and most of my family was console gamers as well.
That reminds me, I think I remember playing, I don't know if it was the same one, but I also remember being somewhere and there was like this Sega Mega Collection game pack thingy, and I really went to town. So, were you really invested in games back then, or was it sort of on and off during your childhood?
I think I was definitely really invested in games as a child. So basically, on my mom's side of the family, I don't really have any cousins, but on my dad's side of the family, I have a bunch of cousins. So when I was younger, I'd be visiting them a lot, and like the main way that we were bonding was through video games. Like we'd play a lot of Halo and stuff. So I was like constantly being exposed to games. Even my dad was into games to some extent. So like it's always kind of been there.
Is there anything that you feel like you really got into compared to Osu, or was Osu sort of a complete different ballpark for you?
Yeah, when I started playing Osu, it was definitely the game that like I felt like I was always going to come back to. I never thought about quitting. But before that, I actually used to be a very big Maple Story slime. But this was like really way back in 2012. I think I played for quite a few years around that time. But I eventually just quit that because the game has changed a lot.
Is slime the term for active MapleStory player?
No, that's just the term for active Lily that plays MapleStory.
Oh.
Slime.
So, among many other things, you are very well known in the OS community for using full area on your tablet, which is more or less equivalent to using very low mouse sensitivity. And over the years, this has basically evolved into this group of people who really identify with and bond together as people who basically use full area. And through this experience, I think especially as someone who sort of spearheaded or was one of the main figures around that sort of mini community section of the community, what sort of lessons have you learned about identity and loyalty to such identity?
Well, okay, when SFA was smaller, it was just me and, a couple other people that were also SFA that wanted to stick together and share our experiences. And like, we were interested in each other's playstyles, of course. Like, when I originally made, or when we had the first real SFA team, it was me, Eddie, and Frankie. And all three of us had pretty vastly different playstyles because Eddie was more into like speed and DT, and I was more into aim. And Frankie, of course, is really good at streams and stuff. And as it was evolving, like I was just seeing more and more people with all kinds of different playstyles and how they were overcoming these almost like barriers that they were facing because full area sometimes some people can see it as a hindrance, but it can eventually be really fun once you start getting into it. And making the SFA server or even just like making SFA as like a tag really like I felt like it helped people connect to some extent because it was just kind of a way to relate to other people that maybe you don't necessarily know so much, but you're both involved in something that the other person enjoys, which makes it really easy to make new friends and have new conversations, right?
Right. I think that's especially important somewhere like the OC community, where it's one of those communities that is very unique in how you're able to interact with all the other players. But at the same time, I feel like it can be hard to really break in or find people that you can really connect with. So I think it's really cool that something like SFA exists, which can you give a bit more backstory on the name and from what I remember, it started as a tournament team name that was it either Eddie or Frankie that made up basically when you were all going to sign up for a team together. So from what I understand, it wasn't really originally about full area to begin with. That was sort of a side afterthought, so to speak.
Yeah, so we had Canadian Draft Cup, which I think Eddie was one of the hosts or something like that. And when I was drafting a team, I'm pretty sure that was also the same year where I drafted Frankie on my team. And I didn't really know anything about Frankie until then. That was kind of when we started to become friends. So Eddie just arbitrarily named our team Stanful Area because I didn't submit a team name. And only until later did I actually find out Frankie was full area, like after the tournament concluded. So I didn't even know at the time.
Oh, wow. So that was the origin. It was a mistake, more or less, of not submitting a team name. But that's cool. And yeah, so SFA, again, stands for Stanful Area, right?
Yeah.
I sort of just realized that we didn't really emphasize that.
Oh, my bad. But yeah, it's been a nice ride so far. Especially like when so basically we have a Twitch team where people will submit like a live play of themselves using full area, and I can add them to the Twitch team. But like doing that and seeing all the people submitting their live plays, I can see like so many different kinds of playstyles that I never thought were even possible before. Like I've seen someone with their tablets. I don't really know how to describe it, but the tablet was on their hips, like the bottom of it, and the top was like on the edge of the desk, so it's like slanted. Yeah, and they're just playing like that, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
So it's definitely gotten me to like reach out to many new people as well because I'm curious about stuff like that.
So in your experience cultivating both the SFA community and also your livestream community, what would you say makes a good community?
Well, I'll say this so much as for my server at least, because my server obviously is the one that I'm focusing on way more.
Or your livestream, right?
Yeah, where I live stream, like I'm way more active in there.
Oh, okay.
But my whole like hypothesis, I guess, or my idea for creating a server is to just have a safe place for people to like learn new things, make new friends, and like there's so many more subgroups in there. Like of course I have SFA people in my server as well as the SFA server. So it's many different kinds of people mingling and sharing ideas, and it's super nice because then I can also get involved in these talks and meet new people.
I like how you emphasize sharing ideas. I think that's something that if you're able to bring together people that have one thing in common, but also sort of come from many different walks of life or just related to Osu, I think many different play styles that all sort of converge with a similar aspect of being full area. I think, I don't know, I think it creates definitely a much healthier sort of environment.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when I was kind of like creating the server, I didn't want it to be about me, right? I just wanted it to be about people that want to share the same space, and I'm just there, and I'm there to oversee it kind of thing.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
What would you say is the role of authority in a community, especially if you're trying to make one that's sort of a safe space? Do you feel like each individual in the community should have an equal say as to how things are operated? Or do you feel like there is a need for basically having a sort of central power that makes most of the decisions?
So when I have my mods make decisions, I kind of honestly let them go free reign because when I'm bringing them on, I want them to like, or at least when I'm interviewing them and I'm talking to them, I kind of have the idea that they're like on the same wavelength as me almost. So I understand that or I hope that they can make their own appropriate decisions based on the rules of the server and everything like that. And if they really do need something, of course, they'll ask me if they're not sure. But like, I put my trust into the mods, and the mods actually, turn into my friends. So those are just my friends now, and they just share the same ideals as me and ways to keep the server safe.
So when you were selecting your moderators, did you have an application process with interviews?
Yeah, so I had a form, and then if I liked your form, I think I took like 10 or 15 people into an interview, and it was like on the stage channel in my server, which is pretty funny. So we did an interview, and it was just me thinking about it, and then I ended up taking on I think 5 people, and that was back in February 2021, and I haven't looked for any new mods since then. At least for Discord, there's a couple of Twitch mods here and there, but
What have you learned about the interviewing process and what makes a good candidate, sort of from your perspective, having done interviews yourself for a role?
honestly, well, at least when I'm being interviewed, right? Like, here, I'll say this: when you're interviewing me and I'm having talks with you, it's like very insightful, and at the same time, you're talking about things that I want to talk about, which makes me excited and wants me to talk about them. So when I was doing the mod interviews there, I was trying to find topics that like um, people would potentially be interested in, or if I could like get them to speak about what they were passionate about, and I could see the passion in them, and that they're like very proficient in something, or they really enjoyed something, and that they had that vibe. Like it would
Oh,
it would make me very likely to hire them. Like some of my mods, there's one of my mods that's like really into politics right now. He's one of my closest friends, and some other ones, into accounting. They all have like
I see.
their little licks of life, right?
Right.
They love to do.
That's
I
cool.
like passionate people.
What are some things that you wish you started doing when you were younger? If you could give your younger self some advice.
I kind of wish that, well, two things kind of. I wish I was more active physically, because I really was in elementary, and then it kind of stopped. I did not want to go outside at all. Which also leads into another thing, was I wish I was more like almost extroverted. Like I'm a pretty introverted person. I like to talk to people, but if it's like in an outside public setting, I get burnt out very fast. So I kind of wish I had more relationships with people IRL, but I do love my online friends as well.
So, on a similar note, are there any sort of toxic or unhealthy sort of like habits or mindsets or just things that used to be in your environment as a whole that you have since gotten rid of and are very glad that you did?
This might sound a bit weird, although I don't want it to sound weird, but recently I moved out from my mom's place, and ever since I did that, I felt like I had more of more control over my own schedule and things that I wanted to do. Like I like my mom and everything, but I didn't feel like I couldn't like live up to my potential almost. Like I needed more freedom to be available to do things when I wanted to, especially with my work and with streaming. Streaming was a big thing when I moved out. So
Oh,
I'm definitely happy that I did that.
do you feel like when you were there, it was just sort of like this omnipresent, uncontrollable variable that could like mess with your schedule, so to speak?
Yeah, sort of. Like, I guess I have the kind of parent that is like, if I'm at home, I must be available, right?
Right.
24/7. Even though I'm working or I'm going to school, I'm like taking online classes or something. And like, it would really mess with my vibe. I didn't
Right.
like that.
Well, I'm glad you were able to make it out.
Yeah. And I mean, we go grocery shopping like every other week or something. So we're
That's
chilling.
good. Also, you didn't move that far.
No, yeah, really close.
So, along with Osu, from what I know, you're also quite an experienced artist. So, how similar would you say the learning curves are between Osu and drawing, and what comparisons would you make between the two?
I thought about mentality immediately, because art is also kind of a mental game. There's this funny kind of meme, a little bit, I guess, where people will see artists post online and they're like super, super young, like 13, 14, and they're just amazing. Like they're way above what you expect their skill level to be. And you end up, comparing yourself to these people and wondering why you're not as good as them. And I think that's like almost a direct parallel to Osu. or like you're comparing yourself to other players and how you feel like you're stuck at your own level.
Do you feel like you've learned more about mindset around comparison through OSU or through drawing?
I think through art, honestly. Some of the greatest tips that I learned were first through art, like that you should be comparing yourself to yourself, like see your own growth and find your own paths and like find your own ways of studying and improving. Like I think those are really important concepts in design and art.
How similar would you say the phrases draw more and play more are?
Actually like insanely similar because people just say practice, practice, practice because there's like no such thing as talent basically in art. Like it's just hard work and dedication and having that like keen eye. Um
What's a keen eye?
a keen eye, like I guess there are different kinds of things in I can't remember all the names now in art, but for composition there's like, shape and form and color. And maybe this has to do like relate some very loose relation to Osu and skill sets, but like some people are really good at seeing like putting the color wheel into action and telling a story through the color wheel, and some people are really good at composing space on a canvas and like filling it up with emotion or something. And everyone kind of has their niche there as well.
Right. I would probably imagine there's definitely some similarities as a beginner you sort of go through the same sorts of basics, and then at a certain point in your improvement you still in some sense improve a little bit at everything, but you I guess start to specialize a little bit in something, usually the aspect that you think is the most fun or that generally you're the most passionate about.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
If you had to stick with only one, would you choose drawing or OSU?
Ooh. You know, I think well, I'll just expand on that a little bit because I don't only do drawing, like I do 3D stuff as well, which I guess is like my actual job.
So we'll categorize that as art.
Yeah, I was like art, the
Right.
creative side. Um, it's a tough question. There's things I love about both, but I feel like the side where I'm doing art has like a way more exponential growth almost compared to just Osu. If I'm talking about streaming, then I would probably just stick to streaming because there are so many opportunities there as well. But of course, I enjoy both of them. It's actually a really hard question.
It's interesting because for you, both of those options are both a passion and a source of income.
Yeah.
Can you expand on what you meant by exponential growth with art compared to OSU?
Well, what I was thinking about is that for art, there's kind of like many, many different paths that I could be going down. Like, I could continue with what I was doing right now and work in like a big studio or something, working on games. I could go and, create my own art and sell it. And there's so many different other hobbies and artistic venues that I haven't even explored yet that are like very interesting to me. And then Osu's kind of just Osu, just a little game, little silly game.
So what if we categorize them as art or live streaming?
I think live streaming, I've been having kind of a weird thing recently with streaming. Like I really, really love streaming and I actually genuinely enjoy doing it. But I feel like sometimes I'm honestly hindered by I get like pretty bad anxiety, I guess, and sometimes it's unknown, and sometimes it almost stops me from streaming some days. But if I could control that better, I would be streaming like all the time. I think I would fully pursue it. But right now, with like my emotional state, my mental state, I'm happy with having the balance of the streaming and the art. Like I don't want to just pursue one right now.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Have you sort of gone through phases of something similar in the past? Is this a relatively new experience to you as far as like feeling like you sort of have this anxiety holding you back from live streaming as much as you would want to? Or is it sort of something that you've gone through before?
I think it's kind of something I've gone through before. It's kind of just like an ebb and flow. Like sometimes I'm feeling really really high energy, like for some weeks, and I really want to stream all the time. And then some weeks I maybe find it a bit harder to, take care of myself, eat healthy, and it ends up dipping my mood quite a bit. So I'm trying to find that balance kind of in between.
Do you have any insight for either ways that you try to bring yourself back up from these positions, or just generally what you would advise if someone else maybe resonates with basically what you were describing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still trying to learn how to help myself every day, but definitely if you're able to, I think it's really important to just take time to fully analyze what your body's telling you. Because if you're going through motions like that, most likely there's something that you're doing that is just not fitting right with your body. Like for example, I was saying sometimes my appetite really isn't so good, so when my appetite is really out of whack, then I start getting like way more anxiety. So I have to take a step back and actually give myself time to get back on track and get like a healthy eating habits back and stuff like that. But I do have the privilege of taking that time, so just try your best to listen to what your body is telling you, because it's not just trying to hurt you. It just wants to tell you something, I think.
Yeah, I like the way you worded that, especially at the end, where I often use the same sort of description of like your body sending you signals in relation to Osu. When people are like, what's the difference between like bad pain and like the burn or like that sort of stuff, usually in regards to training tapping stamina. And usually the way I describe it is that your body can't really talk to you through words. And so it basically just tries to send you signals instead. And sometimes it tries really hard. And I think sometimes you have to be willing to listen and really take a step back, sort of recognize what your body is trying to tell you. Because there's only so many ways that your body can tell you to, take a chill pill, just take a step back and, work on, or either stop doing what you're doing if it's harmful, or change something about your lifestyle if it's really distressing in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And some people are better at listening to their body than others, but it's your own body, so you will learn one way or the other.
Yeah, I would definitely also say if you haven't, I guess this is more something that you do gradually over time, but take some time to get familiar with the signals that your body sends you and like what they actually mean. I spent way too long, just as a personal anecdote, before tournament matches, especially I think during high school. I think I'm better at this now, but I would skip meals a lot. And so every now and then during a tournament match, I would not be able to control my fine motor skills as well. And either like I didn't really feel nervous and my aim was like uncontrollably either shaky or like just generally couldn't control it. And I would just have this like very odd sort of feeling. And I think when you combine hunger, I guess, with stress, like something that's either nerve-wracking or stressful, I think it's a really bad combo because the stress or nervousness sort of closes up your stomach. But at the same time, because you're not hungry or because you're not well fed, then bad things start to happen. So I think just in case someone can take something from this, that it took me a long time to realize that I should at least make sure that I'm well fed, and basically learning what that signal from my body actually meant. If I felt this sort of like oddness or like inability to control fine motor skills, that more or less meant that I had to eat, which might sound obvious to some people, but I think that's another thing where it, for one, might not be obvious to everyone, and there might be some things that I don't know. I think it really helps to be able to experiment with yourself and get to know sort of what those signals actually mean.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. And I was just gonna add on to that, saying that I've been saying recently that I'm actually heavily going to be cutting down on tournaments, because with me being in PST,
PST is the time zone.
the time zone, yeah. So around times like Corsace or OWC time, when we have to do these really big team tournaments, usually I'm playing around 6 to 8 a.m. And I find that during the weekends where I wake up and I have to play before I eat, sometimes that can actually throw off my like appetite for like weeks. Like
Oh
sometimes I will
wow.
have too many, yeah, I'll have so many tournament matches in a day where I have a really big problem with this, but like if my appetite is not good, then my anxiety just goes up like tenfold. And like you were saying, like your appetite just diminishes, your stomach gets smaller, like it's really hard to get
Yeah.
back on track with eating.
And you can't even eat if you want to sometimes.
Yeah, so like I could have done it before, maybe in like 2020 and 2021. Like I could have done it before, but because I'm still growing and my body's changing, my body's telling me like I literally can't do that anymore. Like it's the tournaments are actually making me suffer because I have to be healthier, basically.
Right. I know you mentioned on your stream earlier today that you're, as much as you enjoy tournaments, you're trying to only play the more major tournaments, just sort of for that reason. And
Yeah.
even then, those tournaments, those really big international team tournaments, because of how the players' time zones are all over the place, you usually have to schedule at a time that works for everyone, which, again, you mentioned considering your time zone being West Coast in America, that really it's rough on both ends of the spectrum. Both West America and East Asia sort of get owned, and Australia is really bad with international times. They're usually playing, if you have a tournament match that has one of every time zone, usually the Australian player ends up playing around 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and then the West Coast American player ends up playing around 6, 7, sometimes 8 if you're lucky.
Yeah, it's actually quite crazy. Like, and these players are like hardcore tournament players are playing multiple tournaments every single weekend for the entire year. Like, I don't think I've had a free weekend from tournaments for almost 3 years now, pretty much. So yeah, it's really hard. And for me, just as a person physically, I've never been able to like really skew my sleep schedule to suit tournaments because my body will always tell me like around 10 to 12 or something, like I will go to sleep and I will wake up around 7 to 9, which is, it benefits me in tournaments because I would wake up at that time anyways, but it still kind of blocks me from having breakfast half the time, and that's when my body will always be hungry. Like I have a really strong internal clock, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's even worse, like you mentioned, with players that are in so many tournaments at the same time. Because let's say you are able to get a match at 9 a.m., but you can't schedule it at that time because you have a different match that can, for one reason or another, can only be at that time. So you sort of have to work around it. And sometimes scheduling matches around each other sort of forces you to end up scheduling things at 6, 7 a.m. So yeah, it's rough.
It's so rough. I actually, even past that, like right before I left for Anime North, which was earlier this month, I believe it was 2 months straight before I left for vacation. My company that I'm working freelance with, like alongside, they basically signed this pretty big deal, which was like, okay, we're gonna keep getting work constantly. So I work maybe like 4 days in a week, and I work pretty low hours, but I still work 4 days a week or 5 days depending on the project. And basically 4 days I was working, and 4 days I was playing tournaments. Like Friday, Sunday, Monday, I missed one, Saturday, and I did not have a day off for 2 months. And that's when I realized, like, okay, like this is way too much. You know,
Yeah.
that's a lot of days to be committing to Osu.
So, sort of on the other side of the spectrum when it comes to lessons from playing tournaments, especially having been, first of all, a very competitive tournament player for the last few years, and also one that sort of really has an audience or is typically in the spotlight. What sorts of lessons have you learned about loss or disappointment slash sort of failure to meet expectations either of yourself or of the people that are watching?
I'm honestly, I think I have a pretty like tough mental when it comes to tournaments. Like I'm trying to think right now, and I don't think there's been a time where I felt genuinely genuinely sad that I lost. Because if I felt like I put up a really good performance and I still lost, like I will still be happy. If or when I played against Utami in Corsair's Closed recently in the 1v1, I lost and I was crying, but I was not crying because I lost, right? Like I was crying because that was such a good match and I feel like I exerted everything to play that. And I think honestly it was like apparently very touching to a lot of people to see that. But yeah, I've definitely never really hit that really low point like I suck or something. Like I just try to do my best all the time whenever I can.
I like how you mentioned the part about just measuring your success by whether or not you feel like you performed your best. As a slightly random aside, when you said that, it reminded me of the clip when Xeris FC'd Mad Machine. I don't know if you remember seeing that.
I don't remember.
Oh, it was in OWC 2016, where basically right when the map ended, so Mad Machine basically is this very dense, like tapping speed map And this was in grand finals, and for context, people were, for lack of a better term, much worse at the game back then compared to these days. But yeah, so they played that map. It was like United States versus China, and Xarius, who is from the United States team, right when the map ended, in the voice comms, because the voice comms is all you get from like the perspective that's recorded. Right when the map ended, Xarius unmuted and he was like, dude, I just FC'd Mad Machine. And everyone was like, oh my god, Xarius, oh my gosh. And then everyone was like freaking out, and then there was like a small pause, and someone was like, what? And then like the voice call goes dead quiet, and then Emla is just like, we lost.
No.
And then everyone's like, oh man, it's so sad. And then Xarius sort of had this like he was like, obviously a little like, you get bummed out if you like feel like you did really well and you still lost, but he basically, I mean, you could tell through his voice that he sort of still had a smile on his face, and he was like, man, I did pretty well though, I'm happy with that score, that sort of thing. And yeah, I don't know, I think that's like, at least in my mind, one of the most iconic moments in OSU tournament history is the Xarius Mad Machine FC.
That does sound very cute. You'll have to show me that clip later, honestly.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely one of the greatest clips in the game. Yeah, I know Toy in particular, I can always like reference this meme to him, and he will like he will imitate Xarius every single time. It's just like it's so funny. As someone who at least I personally know for having a very strong mindset, are there any mental tricks you sort of use to get yourself to do things that you don't really want to, be it practicing for a tournament or doing an assignment or just kind of getting up in the morning some days?
If it's related to like I have to do an assignment, or like this is like a time-based activity or just some kind of chore that I have to do, if it's something that I need to do in my computer, I will literally just have it open all the time, even if I'm not necessarily doing it. So the literal moment where I have that spark being like, oh hey, I could do this right now, then I just do it. I guess maybe for chores as well, like, you know, I guess you'll always see the chore that needs to be done. So as soon as you have that one thought about, hey, I could, you know, wash some dishes right now, then I'll just go down and do it right away. But it can be kind of hard sometimes.
Oh, interesting. So you sort of because I feel like the inspiration to do something is sometimes very hard to come by, and very fleeting as well. But sort of reducing the activation energy that's necessary to start on a task, so that once you get the thought of doing it, then it sort of, you're able to get into it as much as or as quickly as possible before that sort of goes away.
Yeah, like actually, for example, something that I do recently is when I'm doing my highlight videos to upload to YouTube, I'll basically go through all of my VODs, and I have little highlight markers of when the funny stuff happens, and I will just have every single VOD open until like I just do them all at once. I get that fleeting feeling like I'll just do it right now. So I just have them all there.
So you set it up in advance, even when you know that like at that very moment you're not super motivated to actually do the task?
Yeah, and like maybe the next day, I'll try to get myself to do it, but it's just way easier than having to set it up to do it if I can just do it.
Right. That's actually a good, never really thought about that.
Yeah.
That's quite wise.
Recommend. It's very good for when I was doing my assignments in college and stuff.
I feel like in some sense it also, I feel like, at least this is sort of my experience, but sometimes when you like suddenly feel bored, you have this like almost unconscious reaction to like switch over to something. Basically, let's say hypothetically you just finished catching up on Discord chat log, and then you were like, okay, you know, you caught up with everything that you wanted to, and then you sort of have this brief moment of like a window of opportunity to like switch to a different task. And I think oftentimes whatever is like most readily accessible tends to be the one that you go over to, or something that sort of feels like the least amount of effort to reach to for still a fair amount of reward of relieving your boredom, basically. So just sort of maybe a sort of convoluted way toward it, but basically I think that setting up that task to be in your environment and like prepared to be done, I think can really help in those moments where you sort of like glance at it for a moment and you're like, oh yeah, you know, you sort of realize that you're not actually doing anything in the moment. So
yeah, that's That's exactly what I'm saying. And like I recently was doing that with my room because I'm still like I still have a couple of things to unpack, but like I think it was just the other day or something where I had that moment where I was like, damn, I'm bored. And there was a bunch of boxes behind me. So I was like, oh, might as well just go through all the boxes right now and
Right.
see what's in them and clean them, yeah. So it's helpful.
Are you someone who tends to keep things from long ago, or sort of what is your threshold of like? Are you someone who tends to keep old like books and binders and things, or do you tend to only keep things that are very sentimental?
I am like I wouldn't say I'm a hoarder, but I definitely have a lot of sentimental value like tied to a lot of things. I've been trying to break that a little bit recently, but I let myself keep a majority of things. But thankfully, when I moved, I ended up getting rid of a lot of clutter because I do want to just have simpler things. But like a lot of knickknacks and stuff, I have like memories attached to them. Like that's how I remember things very vividly. So I
Right.
always like to keep little trinkets around.
So, speaking of things that you have around, could you tell us the story briefly of how you got your pet birds?
Did I ever tell you that?
I don't think I actually know the story. Maybe I've heard it, but at least for the people listening, that you have I think two pet birds or three, is it now?
Two. So one is mine, and then one is my partner's. So my bird's name is Oatmeal, and Oatmeal came to me from the heavens. Actually,
Oh,
um, I believe in 2019. Like I must have had her for 2 years or 3 years now. I should probably count, but sometime around this time of year, I think it was like in August, I set up a birthday for her on like the pet store website, and supposedly it was her birthday like 2 days ago.
oh wow.
So, but yeah, she Oatmeal flew into my neighbor's apartment, and I had her just literally sitting in my room like cageless for about 3 or 4 weeks, and I was trying to look for ads to see if anyone was posting anything about a bird being lost or anything, and I could not find anything similar. So after 4 weeks, like I just got a cage, and she ended up being my bird. And then my partner just yoinked a bird off of Facebook Marketplace.
Oh wow.
So that's how they came together.
Was he inspired by your bird?
Yeah, he was saying like he never thought about birds as a pet, but as soon as you see them, like they're so adorable. Like he had to have one for himself basically. We didn't live together at the time, so he ended up really wanting his own bird. So
Oh, do your bird and his bird get along?
they're okay. They're I kind of imagine them as like, they have like a little sibling rivalry or like,
Right.
they bicker, but they're not like fighting or anything. They're pretty well together.
I see. So you said that Oatmeal flew into your neighbor's apartment.
Yeah,
So
and
how
yeah.
did they end up coming to you?
So my neighbor has one kid, and my neighbor was out at work or something, and the kid was home alone. So my mom called me and said, "Can you go over there? Because a bird flew in and he's really scared." So,
Oh,
and I thought it was a crow or something, but
right.
no. To my surprise, it was just a little. It was a baby budgie. I'm sure at that time, Oatmeal was like maybe a year or younger because they have these baby markings on their head.
Oh wow.
So very young bird. Someone just was quite negligent and just let her go.
Oh no. So you decided in that moment to take her on, take her under your wing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess I did take her under my wing, didn't I? Yeah. I wanted to reunite her with her owner, but yeah, no one. I couldn't find anything, so I stole her.
Oh no.
Simple.
What sort of motivated you to hold on to her during, I guess, those 3 to 4 weeks? I mean, was it sort of a? 'Cause I'm sure you've described that maintaining a bird as a pet can cause a lot of headaches.
Yeah, they're quite a bit of work, and they're very social and they're very loud. But thankfully, I actually had experiences with birds before. I think I had birds twice in my life, and before Oatmeal, I think when I was about 12ish, I must have had another budgie. So I was pretty familiar with kind of the care structure, but Oatmeal is definitely she has like a really big personality and she loves to be loud, so she was quite a bit of work.
Oh, I see. Is there another lesson in loyalty somewhere here?
I would be digging really hard if there was.
Maybe too philosophical.
Maybe a bit too philosophical. Just a little silly bird, and I'm a little silly human.
Let's go. So, do you have any advice for beginners, sort of in a general sense, either in OSU or art, or maybe any other activity, or just general advice that you think applies to beginners regardless of the activity?
Yeah, and the first word that came to my mind was passion, because depending on the activity, you will most likely find an aspect of the activity that you're passionate about. Like, I could easily relate this to art and OSU. Like for OSU, I guess my passion was like, maybe not a passion, but the thing that made me really enjoy OSU was that it was a stress reliever for me, and I really enjoyed the game. And eventually, I became passionate about streaming, so that was kind of like the little subset of my passion. And for art, I've always been artistic, I've always been interested in art, but my real passion was in games. So I'm doing 3D modeling and texturing for games now, and that's where my passion lies there. So just like follow what you're passionate about, find the specifics, find what makes you really, really like that activity or really, really like that hobby and go for that.
Do you feel like there's some element of trying something before really knowing that it was your passion in the first place? Or maybe another way to word this is, do you feel like passion comes from doing an activity more, or that you should be able to sort of recognize it at first sight if you're passionate about something or not?
Maybe a little bit of both. And I have a story for this actually, because originally when I went to art school, I was going because I wanted to be a concept artist for like characters. I wanted to design characters from scratch, and I wanted to do illustrations. And in my course, basically they took you through the entire pipeline of the production of like an asset. So I learned everything from concepting the asset to making it real in 3D, and then texturing it, and then lighting it, or sometimes even rigging it and animating it. So I ended up leaving school, becoming a texture artist, and doing the 3D modeling, and actually not ending up pursuing concept art necessarily. So it's something that I wasn't immediately drawn to, but as I was doing it, I was finding my enjoyment in it. So it's a little bit of both, honestly, I think.
Do you feel like your passion is still largely in concept design, or do you feel like they both somehow connect to the same core passion?
I think the core passion is there because my whole thing when I was younger was that there's actually one game that I've referenced a couple of times on stream when people ask me about like my upbringing with art. It's this really old, I think it's a PS2 game, but I had it on Xbox, and it's called Scalar. And it was basically like you're this dude, and excuse me, you turn into a lizard and you go to this lizard world. And but the thing about that game is that they uh they had a section in the menu where like it would show you the concept designs, and this was my first time being exposed to concept art, and I thought the style of this game was so incredible and so awesome. I think I can only compare it to Avatar. You know Avatar, with the blue people.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so it's very like futuristic, kind of organic life forms or whatever. So yeah, the core passion all related back to this is the game that I saw where I saw the concept art and they made the concept art into something awesome. So
Oh, that's
it kind of
cool.
all branches off from that, yeah.
Would you say so? You describe that also as your original exposure to like being interested in art as well, sort of in general?
I think so. I'm not exactly too sure because my dad's side of the family, who was the gaming side, is also very musical and very artistic. Like I have many relatives actually, some that I don't know, who are selling like are selling paintings to museums and things like that. They're very successful artists. So I feel like it's just in my culture too on that side. So they would always be exposing me to art and things like that.
Oh wow. Did you draw often during like early grade school or just grade school in general?
Yeah, I was always the one that would like doodle on every single piece of paper that I have ever.
What lessons have you learned from Osu that you feel like non-Osu players can take away, other than sort of what we've mentioned so far?
Other than what we've mentioned so far.
Right. I think that from what we've mentioned, what comes to mind is maybe comparing yourself to others as like the biggest sort of broad scope sort of advice.
Well, that's a pretty good piece of advice, I'd say. But,
I would agree.
I think we touched on it maybe briefly, but just perseverance and believing in yourself. I've said this multiple times, I think, even on multiple different talks that I've had with you, but like as long as you believe it, then you have the power to like create it, I think, for yourself. Or at least you should believe that you do.
What role would you say that luck plays in success?
Well, for me, sometimes I consider myself lucky because, I happened to go to school and then I happened to really like this one thing that I was learning in school, which was the 3D aspect and the 3D texturing. And I felt like I was lucky when I got out of school because I applied for the right job and, now I'm working a couple months out of school. But at the same time, I look back and I think about it. And the only reason why I was getting lucky in those situations was because I was actually putting work towards them. So the opportunities were just coming, but I had already put the work in, if that makes sense.
So in some sense, you could call it luck, but those opportunities were coming as a direct result of things that you had done consciously and put a lot of hard work into.
Yeah, like the timing, I guess, was luck, but they were going to come eventually for me.
I feel like the more I learn about luck and its role in success, I feel like the more it seems like luck does play a role, but not in the sense that you were granted an ability to do something, but rather that through your own hard work, you sort of create opportunities that can allow luck to come to you.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Well, I think that feels like a very wholesome and enlightening way to end the conversation. Is any other bits of wisdom that you would want to share with anyone listening?
Yeah, you guys should believe in yourself and believe also in others around you and uplift each other and surround yourself with cool people so that you can make cool decisions and be hopeful for the future. And follow Habib because he's my cool friend and he invited me to do this cool podcast, right?
Well, I appreciate you coming here, and yeah, as always, you're always very very fun to talk to and getting to hear your thoughts on everything. So yeah, thanks again for doing this.
Thank you very much again. Can't wait for the next million podcasts we're gonna do.
I'm sure I may drag you back on here at some point in the future, but yeah, thank you again.
No, thank you. Like and subscribe.
Yeah, I'm cutting it off before you say that, I think, but sorry.
That's fine.